Welcome to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the Tributary P118-27-00 Conveyance Improvements Project. This virtual community meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to share vital information with the community and to gather your input on flood risk reduction efforts in your area. Community engagement is a critical component of our work, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us this evening. My name is Robert Fricke, and I am with the Flood Control District's communications team. I am joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and subject matter experts to ensure we continue to keep you up to date on important flood mitigation efforts. We are glad to see the community engaged with this project and look forward to gathering your feedback tonight. Moving forward, we will continue to share updates on this and other projects in your area to keep you involved and informed. First, I would like to begin tonight's meeting with remarks from Harris County Precinct 2 Commissioner Adrian Garcia.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I'm Adrian Garcia, Harris County Precinct 2 Commissioner. Thank you to the Flood Control District for hosting this event. Before we begin, I want to send a sincere thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. I know we are still working through the impacts of the pandemic and now facing some challenges with the economy. High gas prices, inflation, and public safety continues to be on the top of the mind of all of us, especially me. I want you to know that we're in this together, and my team and I are working hard every day to address these issues, especially public safety. Our efforts are already showing positive results, but we're not going to let up just yet. Tonight, we're here to listen about a project that will reduce flooding in your community. We know this is always top of mind for families who have been repeatedly impacted by the flooding in their communities. As a part of my new Revive to Thrive initiative, this flood prevention effort will help protect the community and make a major step toward ensuring there are fair and equitable opportunities for communities throughout Precinct 2. With Revive to Thrive, our goal is to focus on revitalization rather than gentrification by empowering communities and creating opportunities for our existing neighborhoods to be resilient, inclusive, and thriving. With the right investments, resources, infrastructure, commitment, and community involvement like tonight, we can all progress and thrive. Harris County works best when all communities thrive. I'm proud to be from Precinct 2, and I want everyone to know this community is a great place to live, work, and play. This is one of the many flood mitigation projects happening in Precinct 2 aimed at improving our drainage systems to help minimize the impact of major rain events, keeping you, your family, your property, and your community safe. We know that residents in this community experience flooding during major rain events, including Tropical Storm Allison and, of course, record levels during Hurricane Harvey. This project is intended to help prevent a repeat of those events. Quality infrastructure is not only my responsibility as a county commissioner, but it is one of my major priorities. This is why I've asked my team with taking action and demonstrating real progress to address our community's needs. Things that make a difference and make us better prepared to weather the next storm. I hope you continue to stay engaged in this process. It's important to remember that your voice, your experiences, and your opinions do matter. Again, we're thankful that you've joined us tonight. If you need to get in touch with my office, please visit our website at hcp2.com or call us at 713-274-2222 or follow us on social media. We are on every major platform. Our doors are always open. My team and I are happy to support in whatever we can. Again, this is County Commissioner Adrian Garcia thanking you for taking time out tonight. Have a great meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. We appreciate you sharing remarks. This virtual public meeting will begin with a presentation to share project updates, including an overview of the Halls Bayou Bond Program, project scope, timelines, and next steps. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members, where we'll respond to your questions and comment on some of the frequently asked questions we've received from the public. Attendees will be able to submit comments and questions through the website or by phone. Any comments not addressed during the Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the close of the comment period. Instructions on how to participate in the virtual community meeting are included on this slide, this virtual meeting webpage, and the Flood Control District's website. I will also share a reminder of these instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of the meeting. We will now transition to Gary Besmick, Manager of Feasibility Studies with the Flood Control District, who will share information about the Flood Control District and this project. Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Robert. And a special thanks to each of you for joining us. Excuse me. In this presentation, we will give a brief overview of this project. Before we get to the project specifics, we want to share a bit of background about the Flood Control District. The Harris County Flood Control District is a special purpose district created by the Texas legislature in 1937 in response to devastating floods that hit the Houston area in 1929 and 1935. The Flood Control District is governed by the Harris County Commissioners Court and works closely with other entities in our region, such as the Harris County Engineering Department and the City of Houston. The organization was created in part to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood damage reduction projects. Our mission has expanded since our founding, leading to billions of dollars in federal, state, and locally funded infrastructure improvements in the ground. The mission of the Harris County Flood Control District is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. One of the most difficult challenges we face is constructing effective projects that are sensitive to community and natural values in a highly urbanized area. Harris County includes 23 main watersheds, totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channel. 2,500 miles is approximately the distance from New York to California. A watershed is a geographical region of land that drains to a common channel or outlet. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and needs. The project we are presenting tonight is in the Halls Bayou watershed located in North Harris County. Harris County and our surrounding area is flood prone for a number of reasons. Namely, we experience extreme rainfall events, including tropical storms and hurricanes. Our area is largely made up of flat, slow draining land. And we see large concentrations of clay soils that do not soak up excess rainfall quickly. While the Flood Control District plays a critical role in flood risk reduction, we are one of several entities involved in these efforts in our region. When rain falls on your roof, it flows through several jurisdictions, such as streets and drains, managed by the Harris County Engineering Department, a municipal utility district, or a city, such as the City of Houston, before it flows into a larger channel, creek, or bayou that the Flood Control District owns and maintains. This slide illustrates the various jurisdictions, which sometimes we even share with other entities. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of this illustration, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from homes and streets. Storm sewers and roadside ditches are the responsibility of the underlying municipality. The larger bayous and channels that take the collected stormwater and move it through our drainage system to Galveston Bay are the responsibility of the Flood Control District. This is shown on the right side of the illustration. In the middle is a stormwater detention basin, sometimes constructed by the Flood Control District. When storm sewers on the left are increased, this creates an increase in runoff. Since it is our policy to avoid any adverse impacts from our projects, detention basins help to safely take in and temporarily store excess stormwater during heavy rain events. Often, we partner with Harris County precincts, utility districts, and others to add recreational amenities such as trails to these basins and along our trail channels. On August 25th, 2018, Harris County voters approved $2.5 billion in bonds for flood risk reduction projects. This vote followed a series of 23 meetings with community members across Harris County, one per watershed, which resulted in a list of what is now 181 bond projects. As of August 25th, 2021, every project included in the 2018 bond program has been initiated, including all of the projects in the Halls Bayou watershed. A total of more than $1.35 billion in partnership funding has been secured so far to stretch the 2018 bond program even further. The actual timing of each individual project will depend on a variety of factors, including environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation, and in some cases, the requirements of a particular grant. Project lists and projected schedules are updated regularly on our website. While the bond was for $2.5 billion, the full cost of every project in the bond tables is almost $5 billion. So we made it clear from the outset that we would need funding partners to fully construct the projects in the bond program. As I mentioned, we've had some success so far, having secured more than $1.35 billion in partner funds for projects across Harris County. And this graphic illustrates the many sources of those partnerships, including federal, state, and local funding that Flood Control District is working to secure for Harris County. Each agency has its own definition of eligible projects and its own requirements for local match funding. So the Flood Control District works diligently to match projects to the right partnership opportunities. We will now move into the part of the program that is specifically about the Halls Bayou watershed and the Tributary P118-27-00 Conveyance Improvements Project. As a reminder, we are looking for your input as we discuss the project in more detail. Please feel free to drop any questions or comments into the comment box or to comment via phone by pushing the star key. Halls Bayou spans 45 square miles in north central Harris County from the intersection of Antoine Drive and Fallbrook Drive downstream through the Halls Bayou Greenway to Brock Park. While it is also its own watershed, Halls Bayou is a tributary of Greens Bayou and ultimately empties into that channel. Flooding is a persistent hazard throughout the watershed for residents, businesses, and property owners. Tropical Storm Allison in 2001 is still the storm of record for Halls Bayou watershed, as it flooded more than 13,000 homes. Then in 2017, Hurricane Harvey flooded an estimated 11,830 homes in the Halls Bayou watershed. The Flood Control District is taking a watershed-wide approach to planning and flood risk reduction projects in Halls Bayou through the Halls Bayou Bond Program. There are 14 bond IDs associated with the Halls Bayou Bond Program. Each of those bond IDs include multiple projects focused on reducing flood risks in the Halls Bayou watershed. This watershed-wide approach provides a holistic view of activity in the watershed and enables the Flood Control District to deliver these flood risk reduction projects strategically and efficiently in a highly developed area. Projects primarily include construction of stormwater detention basins and channel conveyance improvements on the Halls Bayou tributaries and portions of the main stem. Now we will talk a little bit about the funding for this project and others in the Halls Bayou program. Throughout the presentation, we'll be using terms like 100-year, 10-year, etc. A 1% annual chance event is a 100-year event, meaning that there is a rainfall event that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. That does not mean that if you have a 1% chance event today, you are safe for another 100 years. It is simply a measure of the expected frequency based on the historical data that we have. By the same token, a 10% chance or 10-year event is a rainfall event that has a 10% chance of occurring in any given year. A 50% or 2-year event has a 50% chance of occurring in any given year, and a 0.2% annual chance or 500-year event follows the same nomenclature. I think it is important to remind you that the precipitation depths for each of the specified frequencies are based on statistical data and they are not related to each other. For instance, a 100-year storm does not have 10 times the rainfall of a 10-year storm. The Flood Control District has several flood risk reduction tools at its disposal that can reduce flood damage throughout any given watershed. Tonight, we are focused on two specific flood reduction strategies within the toolbox: channel conveyance improvements and stormwater detention basins. As I mentioned, these are two of the tools that we frequently use within the Halls Bayou watershed to reduce flooding risks for area residents. Now, we will get more into the specifics of the project we are discussing tonight. Tributary P118-27-00 is a channel that runs north and south and is located to the west of the intersection of Airline Drive and West Gulf Bank Road. The upstream portion of the channel near the confluence with Halls Bayou is a grass-lined channel, while the more downstream portion of the tributary is concrete-lined, which is done occasionally to prevent erosion and other similar issues. For this project, we focused our analysis on the more upstream portion of the channel. We are considering both channel conveyance improvements and the construction of stormwater detention basins to provide flood mitigation to the surrounding area. The estimated cost of this project is $15.6 million. I will also note that Harris County Engineering has a project to improve Gulf Bank Road, and we are working closely with them to ensure that our two projects are in sync with one another. This illustration represents the typical life cycle of a flood control district flood reduction project. Currently, we are finalizing the preliminary engineering stage, or PER. After completion of the PER, we'll move into right-of-way acquisition and design stages of the project lifecycle. Completion of these stages will lead us into construction and ultimately to the operation and maintenance of these implemented improvements. The purpose of the PER stage is to focus on identifying and evaluating possible alternatives to reduce flood risks within the Tributary P118-27-00 project area. There are several criteria in mind as we evaluate possible alternatives, with the most important being hydraulic and drainage benefits provided to the project area, such as reducing flood risks and mitigating any increase in flow downstream. The objective of the PER stage is to perform a detailed analysis of potential channel conveyance and stormwater detention alternatives within the project area, to identify right-of-way necessary to facilitate project implementation and maintenance, and finally, to identify and minimize project constraints such as utility relocations and environmental impacts. At the end of this stage, a preliminary engineering report, or PER, will be prepared that provides a recommendation that will move into design and construction. This map shows the existing conditions of the project area that we are analyzing as part of the PER stage that we just discussed. During our analysis, we found that this area floods during a 100-year storm event due to inadequate channel capacity and length, as well as overflows from Halls Bayou main stem and adjacent channels. As you can see, the closer you move downstream towards the confluence with Halls Bayou, the flood risk increases. Parts of the P118-27-00 drainage area are in the 500-year floodplain, or the area that has a 0.2% chance of flooding any given year, and closer to Halls Bayou is in the 100-year floodplain, or the area that has a 1% chance of flooding any given year. We will now look at both of the flood mitigation tools that we are considering for this particular project. Unfortunately, tonight, we are not able to share exact details on the alternatives that our project team is considering because we still need to acquire the necessary right-of-way in the project area. The first flood risk reduction tool that I want to discuss is utilizing channel modifications within a watershed. Channel modifications increase the size of the channel so that it can carry more stormwater or in other words, increase the system capacity. There are different ways to increase a channel's conveyance capacity, which include widening and or deepening the channel, reducing the friction by removing heavily vegetated areas, or occasionally by adding concrete lining. The team looked at a variety of channel modifications aimed at improving the flow capacity within P118-27-00 channel and increasing the flow of stormwater away from areas prone to flooding. One of these modifications includes lining the channel with concrete to match how it is on the downstream portion of the channel. Stormwater detention basins are another structural flood mitigation method that create volume specifically for the purpose of collecting and holding stormwater during a storm event. We are utilizing stormwater detention in this project to mitigate the flow increases created by implementing channel conveyance improvements to P118-27-00 channel. Without stormwater detention, the improvements would otherwise have the potential to cause downstream flooding. During preliminary engineering, we are looking at implementing stormwater detention basins in different parts of the project area. The various alternatives include between 13 and 26 acre-feet of stormwater, or 4.2 million to 8.4 million gallons of stormwater that would otherwise flood homes and businesses. Now, I would like to discuss in further detail how the Flood Control District incorporates detention basins in our projects throughout Harris County. A stormwater detention basin is built to store excess stormwater until it can make its way safely back into the channel and then ultimately out to Galveston Bay. There are several ways for stormwater to fill a detention basin, but it's important to note that all of our structures are passive designs that utilize gravity to operate them, so no mechanical gates or pumps are needed. This illustration shows stormwater overflowing into a basin from a bayou by way of a weir structure. The weir serves as the designated location where stormwater rising in the channel can spill into the detention basin. As the water levels in the bayou recede, the stormwater from the basin drains by gravity through the outfall pipe and back into the channel. These maps show the goal conditions once the project is constructed. As you can see, there is a reduction in the inundation area in both the 100-year and 500-year level storm events compared to the existing conditions map that we showed a couple of slides ago. This project will allow stormwater to convey quicker out of the drainage area, which solves the main flood issue in the area. By implementing these proposed flood risk reduction strategies, this project will provide the following benefits during a 1% annual chance event or a 100-year rain event. The project removes inundation from up to 296 structures. It removes inundation from up to 84 acres of land, and it removes inundation from approximately 2.8 miles of roadway. These benefit numbers are based on models that use pre-Atlas 14 data. The benefit numbers may change when Flood Control District releases new models based on the Atlas 14 data. In addition, this project will reduce the flow of stormwater entering the Halls Bayou main stem during rain events, helping to reduce the flood risks downstream. The last thing I would like to touch on are the next steps, specifically where we go from here. We are currently in the preliminary engineering stage and finalizing the PER. In the near term, the PER will be completed and approved by Harris County Commissioners Court. We anticipate the PER will be completed this fall. Upon completion of the PER, our team will begin initiating the required right-of-way acquisition. Once these activities are initiated, the Flood Control District will host an early design community engagement meeting to share the details of the proposed project. The final design stage includes the development of detailed construction drawings and specifications that will be used to construct this project. We currently anticipate the design stage to be completed in the fall of 2023. Once funding is secured, construction of this project can begin. At this time, we anticipate construction to begin in the spring 2024 and to be complete in the summer of 2025. With that, I would like to send it back to Robert to close out the presentation and take us into the questions and answer portion of our meeting.
Thanks, Gary. Before we move into the Q&A, I want to share a quick reminder that we're looking for your input. We'd love to hear from you on this and other projects moving forward across Harris County. Your input is critical as we continue to develop project plans for this and other flood risk reduction efforts. All comments and questions received this evening will be considered as we develop plans for this effort, but the conversation doesn't end here. To learn more about this project, ask questions, and sign up for our mailing list, please visit hcfcd.org/C30. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. Submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. Submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C30, or submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801, utilizing meeting code 5294. If you are joining us via phone tonight, please press star to leave a message. Additionally, I want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District following the close of the comment period. Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and YouTube channel. Joining Gary for our Q&A session tonight are Dora Jacob and Shin He. Now it's time to take some of your questions. All right, our first question tonight is for Shin. Shin, will the projects in the Halls Bayou Bond Program eliminate flooding altogether?
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for the questions. So no, all the watersheds in Harris County, including the Halls Bayou watersheds, are at the risk of flooding. There are several factors. First, our Harris County the land is flat. That means when there's rain and it drains slowly. And the second factor is we have impermeable clay soils, means we have a less ability to filtrate the water into the grounds. And then less, we're in a coastal area, we're prone to the severe rainfall, and including the tropical storms and the hurricanes. So with our projects, the purpose is to reduce the risk of a flooding. It will not eliminate those risks entirely. Even though with the monies we spend to investments on the projects, there still be the flooding risk. So with that saying, the Flood Control District recommends that everyone in the Harris County and the surrounding area will have a flood insurance to make sure to protect and avoid the possible personal and financial losses. And please visit our website, www.hcfcd.org/MAP next to learn more about the Flood Control's MAP Next program. This is our latest comprehensive and a complete set of the floodplain and information. So,
thank you, Shin. Our next question for this evening is for Dora. When will the Halls Bayou Bond Program be complete?
Good evening. The Halls Bayou Bond Program is slated to last 5 to 8 years. Individual projects are expected to take 3 years to complete, subject to availability of funds and the time frame of the project life cycle. The items that can slow down the projects include right-of-way acquisition, environmental regulations, utility coordination, and funding.
Thank you, Dora. Our next question for this evening is for Gary. Gary, how was this project selected as part of the 2018 bond program?
Yes, thank you for that question. This project was identified based on preliminary data when the overarching bond program was being developed in 2018. The selected bond projects are recommended from watershed-wide planning efforts that were completed and that use benefit scoring and the limitations of funding. So that's where this project came from.
Thank you, Gary. We did receive a question tonight from Shirley. Shirley asked, was this meeting notice sent in other languages other than English, as this sector has Spanish and Vietnamese speaking residents? Yes, notices were sent in English, in Spanish, and other accommodations are available upon request. All right, our next question for this evening is for Gary. Shirley asked, will this project reduce future mandatory buyouts in this area? And also, she would like to know how the flood control district communicates with residents about its buyout program.
Yeah, Robert, I'm going to answer the first one first, and then if I forget to get to the second part of it, can you remind me?
Absolutely.
In order to understand the question about future mandatory buyouts, I just want to give a little background about what the difference is between what we call a buyout and right-of-way acquisition. So a separate program from the bond project that we're talking about today, the Flood Control District has what we call a voluntary buyout program. And that program has very specific reason that we do it. The voluntary program is typically a partnership that we have with FEMA, and we have identified throughout the county pockets of homes, areas that the cost to reduce the flooding for those homes, that the flooding is so frequent and severe in those areas that we really cannot come up with a capital project, a channel improvement or a detention basin that is realistically going to be able to reduce the area that floods. So typically this is a case for this type of program where you have a very large watershed, a lot of flow coming, and the area floods very, very frequent. So if you get 2, 3, 4 inches of rain, you'll start seeing areas flooding. And so what ends up happening is if we have to take a bayou and try to reduce water levels by several feet, we've just determined that the cost to do that would just be so incredible that it just makes sense to put those homes that have that frequent flooding into the category of buyout. So typically our buyout programs are voluntary. So we have a program, a team that goes through that program. They identify homes that qualify. And then during flood events, after flood events, we notify people that their home is possibly in an area that would qualify. And then if people choose to follow that program, they can submit an application and then that process kicks in. Where mandatory buyouts come in oftentimes is after we have acquired a substantial number of homes in a buyout area, and we maybe have just a handful of homes left. Oftentimes we try to go into the mandatory process, and this is just one example of when we might do that. But we're just trying to clear out the remaining number of homes so that the land out there could be converted over to a park space, possibly a detention facility. And so there becomes a community value and need to be able to go through that process. So I wanted to touch on what it means to fall under a buyout program, because as part of this project and other bond projects in the Halls Bayou area, whenever we identify a detention facility or we need to widen the bayou, oftentimes we're going to need to acquire additional land. So when we go through the process of acquiring right-of-way, we don't call that a buyout, because the buyout program is specifically a program that I mentioned before. But when we're going into right-of-way acquisition, that's where we would have to go and notify property owners of our intent to try to acquire a portion of their property, or in some cases the entirety, so that we can implement the program. So keeping all that in mind, the Halls Bayou program really is not set up. This project is not really going to reduce the number of homes that are in buyout areas, because those areas were set up in the buyout program, as I mentioned earlier, because there's really nothing else we can do to protect them. even if we implemented this program in P118-27-00, it's really not going to reduce water levels enough that if you're in a buyout area that it's going to solve your flooding. So these are two really separate strategies that we have taken. So the second part of the question, and my screen just rolled, so I need to go back, and how the district communicates with residents about its buyout program. The way we do that is we first have to qualify homes in an area. So we have to do a lot of engineering background to identify homes that potentially would be eligible for future buyouts. And then after flood events, whenever a grant opens, the federal government says, hey, we now have funding or money to acquire homes. At that point, we have to go in and notify residents that are in areas that would be eligible and tell them, hey, we have now funding, and if you're interested, to submit an application. And so because most of these are voluntary, that's where that process begins. It generally began with a letter that would be sent to somebody in an area. And then, if they read the letter and they want to put their name in, they would go through that process. So that was a long-winded way around it, but I wanted to make sure y'all understood the difference between what we call a buyout and right-of-way acquisition.
All right, thank you, Gary. Our next question for this evening is for Dora. Dora, Bryce says his house flooded during Hurricane Ike and Tropical Storm Imelda, and asks, why weren't these events mentioned?
Good question. So the 2018 bond program was sparked after Hurricane Harvey hit in 2017. So Hurricane Harvey is one of the most recent events that occurred, but the Harris County Flood Control District does look at historical data from other storm events as well. But Hurricane Harvey is kind of the most recent that we look at on a regular basis, especially for the bond programs, for the projects sparked by the bond program.
Thank you, Dora. This next question is also for you, Dora. Bryce asks again, what effect, if any, will this have on the flea market?
Other than increasing the conveyance along the channel and reducing the flood risk in the area, we do not anticipate the project having any long-term impacts on the flea market.
Okay, and just one last question, Dora. This next one is also for you. Colleen Gilbert asked, have you determined where a stormwater detention basin will be, or does that depend on where you can get the right-of-way?
Right now, it depends on where we can get the right-of-way. So we're looking at different areas along the channel, and so, but right now, we're still working on the right-of-way, obtaining the right-of-way.
All right, thank you, Dora. Our next question is for Gary. Gary, is trash or illegal dumping a concern in this sector that could disrupt the flow of water in the conveyance channel?
Yes, to answer that question, I'll give you my opinion, not specific to this area, but in general, a lot of trash dumping. Oftentimes when we get large flood events, most of that trash debris is just going to float down the channel, and it's generally not going to cause a lot of problems. But if enough debris is put in of a certain size that it can get wedged up against bridges or culverts, that can actually block the ability of that structure to convey water, and you can have instances where that can create some increases in flood levels. So the flood control district has, in terms of a long term, we have a maintenance team that goes around, and after major flood events, they walk all the bayous to make sure everything is free and clear. We get a lot of calls from residents that will call in and say, hey, there's debris or trash. And then we have property managers that will go out, take a look at it, and determine if that's something that we need to take action on. So yes, in general, a lot of debris, large trash items can create a flood impact. But just somebody dumping a little bit here and there, may or may not be a problem. So if y'all ever see any of that, I would encourage you to call the flood control district, put in a service ticket for us to go take a look at. And then, our property managers can go take a look and then determine what action needs to be taken, if any.
All right, thank you, Gary. Our next question is for Shin. Shin, how much does the Halls Bayou Bond Program cost?
Sure. The total cost to develop and construct all the 14 bond projects that's within the Halls Bayou Bond Program is approximate $225 million. The estimation cost for now for this project is around $15.6 million.
All right, thank you, Shin.
Thanks.
And as a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C30. Or you can submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801, utilizing meeting code 5294. If you are joining us via phone tonight, please press star to leave a message. And as I said earlier, any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District following the close of the comment period. All right, our next question for this evening is for Dora. Dora, where is this project located?
This project is located on the more upstream portion of Halls Bayou, near the intersection of Airline Drive and West Gulf Bank Road, just to the east of Interstate 45, as you can see on the screen, yes.
All right, thank you, Dora. Our next question is for Gary. Gary, why does this area flood?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's actually a lot of different reasons an area can flood, and I'm just going to kind of go over in general, but generally there's 2 categories. Water is trying to make its way to the channel, and then that is always going to be the storm sewers, roadside ditches, sheet flow. So water trying to make its way to the channel, if the road network, the storm drains that are out there and the sheet flow paths are not large enough to convey that water, you're going to see water ponding up whenever you get certain rain events. Now, the second way that you'll see an area flooding is as that water makes its way to the bayou that is wherever this area is. If that bayou is not large enough to accommodate all of the water coming, then you'll start to see what we call the floodplains, where water spills out of the channels and you get these areas of inundation. So this particular area, the main focus of the project we're talking about is trying to increase the capacity of the P118-27 channel. And so in doing that, we're trying to accommodate more water when it gets to the channel, that there would be more capacity for that water to move through the system. As we touched on in the presentation, that goes hand in hand with building detention so that we don't increase the flood risks elsewhere. But this area is also at risk of flooding when you get large events of 5, 6, 7 inches in a 1, 2, 3 hour period. Those are going to be the type of events where you'll see them taxing the local drainage network, which again would include storm drains, roadside ditches, and all the systems that are designed to get the water to the bayous. So the project again is really focusing on the P118-27 channel, but why this area floods is a little bit broader than that, and there's other reasons.
All right, thank you, Gary. Our next question is for Dora, and Dora, this question is similar to Colleen's question from earlier. Are there any homes in the right-of-way of this project?
For the tunnel conveyance improvements, we are looking at doing some widening, and we are trying to avoid structures for the channel widening. For the storm detention, we are still looking at different options. So, but as far as the channel widening, there are not homes in that portion of the right-of-way.
All right, thank you, Dora. And our next question for the evening is for Gary. Trudy wants to know how she can tell if her property is one of the benefited properties for this project.
Yes, probably the best thing for a very specific address, specifically for you, Trudy, would be if you want to reach out and give us your name and your address, we can provide you more detail back. For the purposes of today's meeting, we're really looking at the watershed at a higher level. But as we develop our simulations, our computer models, our engineering study, we have very detailed information about the floodplain and how deep it would be and all that type of stuff. It's just very difficult to share at a high level with every resident. So those type of questions would be best addressed if you're okay to just send us a comment and give us your name, give us your address, and say you'd just like to know specific to what your more immediate neighborhood or address, how this project will impact you. And we can follow up, after this meeting.
Yes. And like Gary said, Trudy, we will follow up with you after the meeting to talk with you further. Okay, our next question is for Shen. Shen, who is responsible for cleaning out the ditches in our neighborhood?
Sure. Thanks for the question again. So the storm sewers and the roadside ditches are the responsibilities for such as City of Houston, Harris County Engineer, and incorporated parts of the county. So the larger buyouts and the channels that take the collected storm sewer and move it through our drainage system are responsibility of the flood control district. The flood control district also constructs many storm detention basins, in addition to the local municipalities or other government authorities. Jurisdiction in House Bayou can be complicated as the City of Houston limits live in and out of the watersheds. So please feel free to contact the flood control district at www.hcfcd.org/contact-us, and we can help to connect you with the right departments, depends on the locations.
All right, thank you, Shen. Our next question of the evening is for Dora. Dora, how does this project fit into the overall 2018 bond program?
The Flood Controls District's mission is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard to community and natural values. This project is among many projects funded and sponsored by the 2018 bond program to implement improvements to historically flooded homes and communities.
All right, thank you, Dora. Our next question of the evening is for Gary. Gary, if you are improving flooding in this area, are you just flooding another area as a result?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Flood Control District, we're what we call a no adverse impact agency, meaning that we cannot and we do not simply transfer flooding risks from one area to another. So we talked about this a little bit in the presentation, and specifically why we have to build stormwater detention basins. Because whenever we do a conveyance improvement project, we widen, we deepen, we concrete line a channel, that is going to allow the channel out there to convey more flows. And unless we improve it all the way down to the bay, at some point, our projects can create an impact. And so we do the detention. So our project engineers that work on our PER studies, our feasibility studies, they must ensure that flood risk reduction efforts such as channel conveyance improvements and other work that are going to be implemented will not increase flooding anywhere else. And they do this by analyzing within their models where impacts might be, and then putting in stormwater detention basins to make sure that they end up with no adverse impact.
All right, thank you, Gary. Our next question is also for you. Gary, how might this proposed project impact property values in the area?
Yeah, the flood control district, we cannot really predict how property values will change as a result of any potential project. However, we know that properties with a lower risk of flooding generally are going to have a higher value than properties with a high risk of flooding. So the intent of this project is to increase channel conveyance, add stormwater detention, and thereby reducing the risk of flooding for a lot of structures in this watershed. So as the lowering flood risks occur, generally, as those homes have a less risk of flooding and don't have the historical flooding, the property values generally would increase. But it's hard for us to predict, specifically where and how, but generally that's the trend.
All right, thank you, Gary. And I would just like to remind everybody that you can provide public input for this project by visiting hcfcd.org/C30. And also during the remainder of tonight's live stream, you can comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can also submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801 utilizing meeting code 5294. And as usual, any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District following the close of the comment period. All right, our next question is for Dora. Dora, what is meant by the term 1% 100-year floodplain?
The 1% 100-year floodplain, also known as the base flood, is an area of land that has a 1% chance of being inundated by flood waters from a bayou or creek in a given year. The 1% 100-year flood event is a regulatory standard used to administer floodplain management programs and the National Flood Insurance Program. And it's also used to set building requirements for new construction. Statistically, 1% or 100-year flood has a 26% chance of occurring during a 30-year period of time, which is pretty much the length of many mortgages.
Thank you, Dora. Our next question for the evening is for Gary. Gary, can you all stop the new development going on across the street from my neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a great question. In general, the Harris County Flood Control District, we are not a permit authority and we are not a floodplain administrator. And what that basically means is that our role in development is really to make sure that the development as it comes in does not put more water into the bayous that we have authority over. So all new development within Harris County must comply with strict requirements for stormwater detention. And development criteria have been in place for the last 30 years, and it is always required for any development in the county. So these development criteria require that all new development mitigate for flooding drainage impacts that may be caused as a result of the development. So as part of that review process, as developments come in, we have a role to make sure that that development is not increasing flows into the Bayou network. But the specific question is, can we stop it? If somebody is going to show us that they're putting more water into the Bayou and creating an impact, then that development would never get permitted. But again, we're not a permit authority. All we can do is provide comments back to the permit authority to say, no, this is a problem, or yes, they're in compliance with the criteria that they need to follow that ensures no downstream impacts.
All right, thank you, Gary. And as we reach almost at the close of our meeting for tonight, I would just like to reiterate that you can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can also submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C30. And also, if you're joining via phone tonight, you can comment at 855-925-2801 utilizing meeting code 5294. And if you are joining us tonight via phone, please press star to leave a message. And as usual, any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response after the close of the comment period. All right. Our next question is for Shin. Shin, what are the current opportunities for construction funding program? Oh, sorry. What are the current opportunities for construction funding and program funding?
Sure. This is a good question. Thanks. So as we previously stated, stats, we would definitely need funding partners to fully construct all the projects under the Hall's bond program. There are many sources, such as federal, state, and the local funding that Flood Control District is working to make sure we can get some for Harris County. And of course, each agency has their own definition of eligible projects. And they also have some requirements for local match fundings. So Flood Control District, we are working to match those projects and to the right partnership opportunities. In addition, the Harris County Commissioner Court is established called the Flood Resilient Trust last year. And this funding source is designed to backstop the overall 2018 bond program to ensure the projects are not delayed due to the lack of funding. So as today, there's zero efforts, including in the 2018 bond program, had been scheduled impacts due to the lack of funding.
All right, thank you, Shin. And our last question for the evening is for Gary. Gary, will there be any recreational amenities planned around this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Flood Control District does not spend its own flood risk reduction money on trails and other recreational amenities, but we frequently share our property and work with partners or organizations who want to finance and maintain those recreational elements that the community wants. Our core mission is to build flood risk reduction projects that work. So we have to balance that with any potential recreational opportunities. You know, there's always a chance that as we add recreational amenities to the footprint of our basin, in other words, we design our stormwater basins or our channel to accommodate or allow, you know, ball fields or dog parks or trails, for example. There's always a chance that if we did too much of that, it might reduce the amount of stormwater storage and thereby reduce the amount of stormwater benefit. So we try to find a balance between our mission of reducing flooding and also trying to recognize that other community goals and objectives such as recreational amenities are equally as important. So as we go through the feasibility process, as we go through the PER process, and ultimately the design process, we will do our best to try to accommodate recreational amenities into our design so that others who have funds to do so can come in after we're done with our projects and construct those amenities, you know, on top or around the infrastructure that we've put in.
All right, thank you, Gary. And with that, I would like to share one final reminder that the comment period associated with this meeting runs through September 1st, but we're always looking for your input and engagement. We also encourage everyone to get flood insurance as flood season in Harris County runs year-round. Thank you again for joining us this evening and for providing your input on this project. We look forward to continuing to share updates as our work moves forward. Stay safe and have a good evening.